Let's bring in a super friend of the show from the Chronicle Telegram, and you can always read him at brownzone.com. He is Scott Petrak. Hello, Scott. How are you?
Scotty.
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Can you help me put some of the pieces back together from what we witnessed yesterday? What did you see?
Well, I saw an offense that could not move the ball consistently. Receivers struggling to get open. Receivers struggling to catch the ball. Receivers struggling to stay up. The line not protecting Joe Flacco well enough. Joe making a couple big mistakes. And then the defense, I don't know if wearing down's the right description, but I think they're asking too much of the defense, and it held up for just about as long as it could, especially without having Denzel Ward. And they really missed him, and Lamar Jackson was able to find the guys that, Denzel Ward's replacements were covering, and for 4 touchdowns. So a lot to fix, and, it just looked awful yesterday.
Does it feel funny that Denzel Ward was out all game?
Yeah, it certainly did. And, all we heard was cramps, and he tried to come back at the start of the second half and couldn't do it. Hopefully we'll get, a little better explanation today or when we talk to Denzel this week. But, Denzel's a gamer, and he's played through injuries, and he's been out there a bunch, and he's a team leader, and he's dedicated. But him not being able to play yesterday was huge. I don't know if the Browns win that game. We talked about them struggling to score, but the defense was holding up, and it felt like every time they got in the red zone and Denzel wasn't there, Lamar Jackson was able to find the guy that Cam Mitchell's trying to guard. Mitchell gave 3 touchdowns. It's a really tough spot for him to be in. Lamar extends plays that makes it even harder on the secondary in those corners. But, I think it plays out at least a little bit differently. I don't think the Ravens get 41 if Denzel Ward is out there like he normally is.
A lot of people pointing the finger at Kevin Stefanski. Is that fair?
For what?
The loss and the way this team is.
But
what
are they blaming him for?
When you listen to what people are saying here, they just, is this team a team? Are they cohesive? Are they making players better? Is the coaching staff making players better? Are they, just in general for a team? Let's face it, they've lost 8 in a row and they can't get to 20 on the scoreboard. Is that Kevin Stefanski's fault?
Yeah, right. Eventually, it all falls back on the coach, and that's life in the big city, and that's how it is with that kind of job. If you're asking me to list the Browns' biggest problems, Kevin Stefanski's not among those. I'm not saying he has no role in this. He's a head coach. He has a role. I feel like he's been given limited talent at certain spots. They just got Judkins back yesterday. You hope they hope that improves the run game, and they need this run game to be legitimate and a threat and keep defenses honest, or otherwise they're going to come after Joe Flacco all day and drop a bunch of guys, and then it's going to be hard. I think the receiver talent is limited, or at least unproven, and that makes life hard on a head coach. So, I think Kevin has shown when he's been given enough talent that he can win and go to the playoffs and get good quarterback play. But when you don't get good quarterback play and all that goes around that, it's hard. So, again, I'm not saying he's not blameless, but I don't think he's the reason they are 0-2 and have lost 8 in a row.
I agree with you completely. I also agree with your wide receiver thought, but riddle me this one, and I don't know the answer to this. You and I have talked about wide receivers way too often.
Yep.
Why do you think they overestimated Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman? 2 guys that I like, and I'm happy to have them on this team, even though they've had some drops and some bad issues here in the first 2 games, because of what they did when Jameis Winston, of all people, was throwing them the football last year.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, Jeff. I don't think that they overvalued Jerry Jeudy. I think Jeudy is a legitimate starting receiver. We can argue if he's a 1 or a 2.
I agree with you. I have no problem starting Jerry Jeudy. None.
Right, and I think he still gets open now. I don't think he's not off to a good start. I had him for 2 drops yesterday, including a bobble on the sideline that he thought he got his feet in. They ruled it incomplete, but it goes as an incompletion. And he had another drop, so that's 2. I had him for at least 1 or 2 in the opener. So he's not off to a great start, but he can get open consistently, and I think he's like I said, he's a legitimate starting receiver. Said Tillman still needs to show more. And I don't know if it was what he did with Jameis Winston that, quote-unquote, fooled the front office. They liked him, right? They drafted him in the third round.
Sure.
We've seen this before. They have a higher opinion of Jamari Thrash than I do. They have David Bell's not healthy now, but they always had a higher opinion of David Bell than I did. And, I know if you're getting elite quarterback play, that raises the talent of the receivers, but I don't think the receivers are doing much, those receivers in particular, to raise the play of the quarterback. I mean, there's a play yesterday where Tillman's running a deep end cut. He's open. Flacco's going to throw to him, and then Tillman falls down. Now, he gets up looking for a flag, feeling like there was contact, but he's supposed to be a big-bodied physical receiver. And I saw him fall down multiple times yesterday, whether it was contact or not contact, and you just can't have that. And that makes life really hard for a quarterback when there's limited opportunities for success. Joe had one, has to pull the ball back down, and then takes a sack. And, I just don't think there's enough production, enough separation, enough consistency from that receiver group as a whole.
Scott, Judy and Tillman are your top two guys at wide receiver. Joe, Dylan Gabriel, I don't know if Dylan threw to those two guys. 15 targets for Judy and Tillman and 6 receptions. That's awful.
Yeah.
Awful
it
percentage.
Is. Yeah, and, and this, again, Joe's not blameless for this either.
Nope.
But there are plenty of balls he threw out of bounds because I think he thought guys weren't open. Plenty of balls he threw in the dirt or out of bounds because he was running for his life. And then there's the drops and the fall downs. And when their margin for error is so thin because they're not scoring a bunch of points, that just kills you. And we saw it week one, right? I mean, the tone of every discussion around the Browns is different if they win week one, right? They're 1-1, and hey, they're tied with everybody else in the division except the Bengals who lost their quarterback. But they lost week one, and a big part of that was because Jerry Jeudy dropped the ball on 4th down, and Seth Tillman had a ball go off his hands for an interception late in the game. So those are the kind of plays that these receivers need to make.
I'm just so frustrated right now. At what point then do we start thinking about toying with the quarterbacks? I know we said yesterday, look, we're going to stick with Joe, but at what point do we just say, okay, I want to see what's on the bench, or you know what? Maybe the two guys I have on the bench are going to be slotted as the backup and the third-string quarterback for the next couple of years, and I'm worried about the guy we're going to get next year. I think that's Andrew's call, not really Kevin's call, but I mean, where are we going with the quarterbacks?
Yeah, it's a legitimate question. I think it's too early for a couple of reasons. 0-2 is not the end of the world as bad as it looked yesterday, and I think you have to commit as a team to, okay, try to get it fixed, try to beat the Packers, Sunday in Cleveland, and see if you can get this thing righted. And I don't think you pull the plug on your plan 2 weeks in. The other part of it is I'm talking about all the other issues on offense. Those don't go away if you make a quarterback switch. I think it's a really tough spot to put Dylan Gabriel into. Say, yeah, we're not really sure about the protection. We had a backup right tackle. Our left tackle's struggling. Our receivers, either they're not getting open or they're not catching the ball. It just doesn't feel like a good time to me to go to Dylan Gabriel. And I think Joe Flacco deserves more time. I think the rest of the team thinks he gives them the best chance to win still. So I don't know if it's in London when you make this switch, if things continue to go in this direction. But I don't think it's now. And, assuming there's not some miraculous turnaround, there's going to be plenty of time for the rookie or the rookies quarterbacks to play. And I don't think it needs to be rushed, and I don't think it needs to be when you might have the best team in the league coming in to Cleveland with Micah Parsons in that defense bearing down on your quarterback.
Good point.
Scott Petrak joining us, Chronicle Telegram, brownzone.com, where you can go and read all of Scott's work as he covers the Cleveland Browns. Quinshon Judkins played in his first game. I want to see more, Scott. Looked okay.
Yeah, he did. We saw that 131-yard run when the game had been decided, when Gabriel was in there. But you saw some stuff. You saw some physicality, saw a stiff arm, saw some cuts. I think it's correct to assume he's going to get better. He had 2 practices, right? So I think he's going to get better. They need him to get better, or they need him and they need him to play a bigger role, and they need that to happen as soon as possible. Because, Joe talked about it at the end of his press conference yesterday, and it's not like a secret, but he talked about when the defense is playing as well as it did, and I know it's 41 at the end, but I thought the defense played really well for a long time yesterday. If you have that kind of defensive performance and you can run the ball, all of a sudden you can win some games. Like, there's a formula there, but it's not there unless you can run the ball. So I think Judkins is the missing piece of that. Now the line needs to play better too. But if you have that and you believe in the run game and the defense, then maybe you can find a way to win games. And we've talked about that forever. Like, that's the recipe and that's the blueprint. But Joe Flacco feels like it's still there. And how the defense played through most of the first two games, I think, is legitimate proof that is a way, as long as you can figure something out offensively, right? You just have to get to whatever. Is it 20 points? Whatever that number is. But the run game is a huge part and a huge step in that direction.
Scott, how much do we point the finger? I'm not talking about pointing the fingers, but it's the consistency of the special teams having problems is becoming too consistent right now. How much of that gets pointed at Bubba Ventrone? How much of that just gets pointed at the talent that they're using on special teams?
I mean, it's tough because I just said, it's not all Kevin's fault. Mm-hmm. And, I think Bubba's a good coach, and he's been around. He's a great special teamer. But it's his decision to have, Ronnie Hickman in there and be one-on-one with that guy coming up the middle. And, the Ravens player, I think it was Hummel, says after the game that, we saw that earlier in the game, and I thought, hey, I'm going to be one-on-one with this guy, and I'm going to be able to beat him. Well, the coach has to see that on the other side, too, say, how are we going to prevent that? And, again, we go back to how thin the margin is here. You can't be giving away points on special teams. And it happens way too often. The kicker was fine yesterday, but yet special teams is still a story because of the block punt that leads to a touchdown, right? It could be 3-3 at halftime, and you're feeling different. And the Ravens approach it differently. Instead, it's 10-3. You get your punter hurt, and like he was able to finish the game, but who knows if there's a lasting, effect there from him getting run over. So, it's happened too often. The special teams has not been a winning factor for this team, I would say, in the last 2 or 3 years, whether it's a return game, whether it's a cover game, and eventually that does go back to Bubba, even though I do think he's a really good coach.
Scott, as always, we are reading at BrownZone.com. You have an excellent analysis every time we talk to you, every Monday. I appreciate you. I just want you to know that.
Thank you, guys.
Avoid the finger pointing in Berea this week, my friend. That's all I'll say.
Yeah,
Thank you.
right.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, bud.
Scott Petrak joining us on the Fan Hotline.